You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, on Twitter at Justin Lonero, along with my co-host, as always, Mr. Bob Harris, at Football Diehard on Twitter, and our executive producer is on the line tonight, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak, on Twitter at FFKyle the Kid. Mr. Harris, it's week 8. What is going on in Albuquerque, New Mexico this evening?
The rain is pouring down, and I have not yet built an ark, but I soon will, and it has to be very large because my cat is like 30 pounds. So this will be a substantial arc that we'll be sailing away in shortly. I hope all you guys are all doing well. It is week 8, pretty much the halfway point of the fantasy football season, so I thought it might be interesting for us to maybe kick around some of the things that have maybe surprised us for better and or worse. And so, Justin, I'll start with you. Give me a happy surprise.
Well, I think you guys know where I'm going with this. Patrick Mahomes at QB1 today is a pleasant surprise. I mean, you guys know I was kind of skeptical about him given the sample size we had on him.
I think that's a generous assessment. You were a hater.
The kid has moxie. I mean, Mike Clay was on the show. Brad Evans was on the show. I made a bet with Evans, and they were adamant that he was going to be a top 12 quarterback. And he is tonight QB1, 20 points in front of Matt Ryan, who was QB2. So that's a beautiful thing to watch. And then you have Tyreek Hill, who is the recipient of a lot of the action that Patrick Mahomes is dispersing at wide receiver 2, and Adam Thielen is 1. So there are some pleasant surprises. Certainly, it's early. We're at the midway point here, but those are some.
It's not early anymore. It's the midway point.
No, we're halfway there. I mean, what's caught you by surprise in a positive light?
Well, I do think, Pat Mahomes, look, in general, let's just say the best news of the year, of any news on earth. Well, I'm probably setting myself up for derision with that one. But from a fantasy football perspective, the best news, 577 total touchdowns this season. The most through 7 weeks of any NFL season ever. 372 passing touchdowns, also the most through 7 weeks of any season. It's been phenomenal. It's been a great NFL season. And, all the things that were being talked about, heading into the season, a lot of things that had nothing to do with football, and we were all focused and concerned. And now it turns out that football is the most fantastic thing ever once again. I think it's been a great season. The Thursday night games have been good for the most part. It's generally been an abyss. So I think it's been a great season in general. Pat Mahomes has been amazing. I think, we're going to get to our unpleasant surprises, but it's hard to not enjoy that story. But what about Andrew Luck?
Yep.
Currently sitting as quarterback 3. The guys that we drafted to be our quarterback 2s that had some upside or potential upside are turning out to be okay. And those were a couple of them. And, honestly, we need some of them because some of the guys we drafted ahead of them aren't delivering to the degree we expected. I'd say Todd Gurley, if you feared regression, fear not. This is working out pretty well for him. You mentioned Adam Thielen going on a streak that's, a historic production. And I think even, you look at the tight ends. 2 of the 3 guys we had singled out as those high-end guys, Kelsey and Zach Ertz are producing like the high-end guys we drafted them to be. They're standing out far and above the crowd. It's still early for Gronk, though. I know it's the middle of the season, and I just busted on Justin for saying it's early, but I have a lot of Gronk, so it's still early there. Kyle, pleasant surprises for you.
Pleasant surprise, let me double down on what you're saying with scoring, specifically looking at efficiency. When you look at something like yards per play, highest it's ever been. When you look at yards per drive, points per drive, all of that is up. I just think decision-making in general has been great, and it's benefited guys like Todd Gurley. It's benefited guys like Carson Wentz since he's gotten back, and Alshon Jeffrey through him. Just overall, I think we've seen some of the best NFL play we've seen. Ignore the one extra penalty you get from hitting a quarterback per game. I think I can live with that if we protect these quarterbacks and make such awesome NFL play keep happening, especially the efficiency. I think is what's so cool is that we're seeing the NFL evolve right before our eyes.
Right, and so, not the name drop here, but I talked to Michael Bublé last week, who I don't often talk to. But, man, he really is a super football fan. And he was just talking about how much he enjoyed watching football while playing fantasy football. And I agree, and some of the games we've been seeing have been so enjoyable. I mean, 60 games decided by one score. That's the second most in league history. We've had tons of overtime games. And as I sit here on Sundays with my DFS tournament lottery tickets, man, I just can't think of having a better time unless I drafted some of the unpleasant surprises. And so let's turn to those. Justin, list me a few of your most unpleasant surprises so far this season.
Well, I would have to say Rob Gronkowski. I mean, you paid.
Oh, now you're just rubbing it in.
No, in season-long leagues, everybody kept talking about the round 2 Gronk premium that you would have to pay, and there should be skepticism, as I was, about him. He is currently at tight end 9. I'm reading and hearing some buzz in this area that the guy has back issues, which has been a chronic problem.
We knew that. That's not a surprise. I mean, it goes back to his college days. I mean, I think the concern for me with him has been they're using him a lot to block. I felt like the offense maybe wasn't where it's going to be in terms of personnel. You had no Julian Edelman early on. And so now then they brought in Chris Hogan. I think it's all starting to come together, and maybe that can bode well for Gronk down the stretch. But, I mean, me pretending it hasn't been a disappointment to this point would be foolish. And I won't pretend that, but I will pretend it's early.
Yeah, and and the guy's missed 25-plus games over the last few years. I mean, he's on the field, he's elite, but he misses time. I mean, they could be preserving him, which would make the most sense, but he didn't make the trip the other day. I listened to Bill Belichick Monday, and it was kind of he was very doubtful, and he did not make the trip. They didn't want to aggravate his back by flying him in Sunday morning.
We'll see if he makes it back on the field with the guy in Monday night game. Who else beyond that?
David Johnson. David Johnson. I mean, we were touting David Johnson all off season. It was his arm, so gentlemen need not to worry because it was not an knee, it was not an ankle, and he's sitting at RB11, which is not terrible, but he's got 100 less points than Todd Gurley and about 60 less points than Saquon Barkley. I mean, it's an awful Arizona Cardinals offense. There's some talk that Patrick Peterson will be leaving. It's tough to watch because you did pay a premium for David Johnson in season-long leagues. He was one of the big 3 with Gurley, Zeke, and
to be fair, the talk of Patrick Peterson leaving is solely Patrick Peterson and his brother talking. Right. And we have a shift in offensive coordinators there this week. Mike McCoy, who, I mean, if you insist on running Johnson at the butt crack of your center every single play, when that dude isn't playing good, your offensive line's not playing well. Here you have a guy, an elite talent, one of those true, transcendent players who can be both one of your top wide receivers and running backs. Yep. I'm hoping Byron Leftwich gets things rolling and is smart enough to see which side his bread is buttered on, which is the Johnson side. And it would help Josh Rosen, especially playing with a lousy offensive line, to get the ball out of his hands more quickly and to a playmaker in space. Right now, that seems like it would be a good idea. I guess in terms of that, Kyle, I mean, we can't sit Johnson. I mean, it's nobody's sitting him. I think we're at the point of the season where, I don't think it's the first half of the season, it's hard to divorce the name from the numbers. You drafted a name, you drafted a history. Right. At this point, we're 8 games in, Kyle. How willing are you to sit a guy like David Johnson in leagues you're in? I mean, are you still playing the name, or are you looking more closely at the numbers?
I will look closely at the numbers and still say he's worth playing because, like Justin said, he's RB11. Of course, it's monumentally disappointing when you drafted him. If you were that confident, you drafted him first overall in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you are disappointed, but you're still playing him because his numbers have been acceptable. They've been RB1, just not the kind of RB1 you invested in.
Right.
And in terms of just name value in general, you have to start divorcing the name value. Look at a guy like Amari Cooper. If you do not divorce the name value at this point, what are you doing? But the only change here is now we have him going to the Dallas Cowboys for a first-round pick. Justin, how much do you think this changes him?
Well, I have used the phrase geographical relocation often, and particularly when it comes to football. I mean, the setting is not ideal, I think, for anyone in Oakland. I think it's turned into kind of a dumpster fire like it has with the Giants and John Gruden. It's just, I was very optimistic about watching a rapport with Derek Carr and Amari Cooper for years to come. But when you look at Amari Cooper, and there's a lot of Amari Cooper cynics out there, and I can't figure out why. 24 years old. He seems like a polished veteran, kind of like Brandon Cooks is very young, but been in the league a while. 2 1,000-yard receiving yards, 2 Pro Bowls. I think he's got an upgrade in Dak Prescott. You got a sound running game in Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas, and that's just what the doctor ordered. So there's no way I'm giving up on Amari Cooper. He has a lot of drops. Okay, he's targeted a lot. That becomes a numbers game. So I'm not going to hang up my cleats right now, because of some drops from Amari Cooper. Again, I can't put enough stress on the fact that he's 24 years old. He's been in the league, it seems like, forever. And Oakland didn't work out, so let's move on. Dallas has had the Michael Irvins of the world, the Des Bryants of the world. This could be time for Amari Cooper, and then consequently it'll help guys like Michael Gallup develop. And we know that the Cowboys yearn for offensive talent outside of Ezekiel Elliott. The Cole Beasleys of the world only go so far. So I am very optimistic, and I hope Amari Cooper flourishes in Dallas.
Look, if you're an Amari Cooper fantasy owner right now, your change of scenery is the best thing you could hope for. I don't know if I'm going to get my hopes up too high, but I think some of the points Justin made are pretty valid in terms of, a better team in general, just a better situation to be in. The Raiders clearly, look, John Gruden's going to be around 10 years. Year one is setting up for year one, apparently. Right. And next year is year one, actually. Yep. We just didn't know that until halfway through what we thought was year one. So, hey, anyway, I feel like, maybe Dallas overpaid for him. Sounded like the Eagles were coming in with a second-round pick. Maybe the Jets might have been interested. But the first-round pick gets it. I think they may well have overpaid at this point, but they definitely had a need. I think, Dallas's passing attack, Dak Prescott, has been a pretty major disappointment. And if Amari Cooper can help in that regard, we'll all be happy. Kyle, just in general, a couple guys that have disappointed you on your rosters personally.
On my rosters personally, I was a big buy the volume guy on Le'Veon Bell. I was so excited. He gets used so much, both as a runner and as a receiver. And people were taking guys like Todd Gurley, get that noise out of here. How often do offensive, skill position players hold out for many games into the season? That never happens. It happened. And another guy who, fantasy-wise, this is always the argument with him, fantasy-wise, Blake Bortles has been good. Real football-wise, he has been very bad, and it is finally showing as he was benched. He will start this coming week, but at this point, what do you do with that? Wide receiver-wise, I've got a little twofer here. One, excitement that we talked about earlier, or at least, we were talking about exciting things earlier. Adam Thielen, pair that with my Stephon Diggs, who has been good. There's no doubt he's been a worthwhile fantasy player, unlike Le'Veon Bell. But just Adam Thielen's been so beautiful crowding him out that I don't know if there's room for Stephon Diggs to grow into this complete breakout star we wanted. He's more of what we saw in the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to, let's get into a few of the newsier items here just real quickly. Le'Veon Bell not likely to show up this week. Sounds now like, I think Ian Rappaport put it best at 4:01 next Tuesday, which is moments after the trade deadline, because he doesn't want to get traded to risk getting traded to a team that maybe is not a beneficial landing spot for him. I get that. Marshawn Lynch, season basically over, placed on injured reserve. I think, you can bring him back maybe a week 17 return as possible, but for all intents and purposes, he's basically done for the year. Doug Martin moves up in the rotation there. Jalen Richard, if you're in PPR leagues, probably a viable play. The Miami Dolphins having all kind of issues at wide receiver with Albert Wilson now down, placed on IR. Kenny Stills is a little bit beat up this week, maybe not going to be ready to play given the short turnaround this week. It might force him to go to Devontae Parker, whose agent ripped the head coach on Sunday for not playing him in that game. So Dolphins kind of a mess. Brock Osweiler will continue to start. A couple running backs I wanted to ask you guys about who kind of screamed onto the radar. They've been creeping their way up, but they screamed onto the scene this week. Justin, Kerryon Johnson, we'll start with him. It was a huge game. Can he sustain a high level of production, or is this going to continue to be a committee and this was kind of a one-off affair?
You know, I think we all hope that that's a trend that we begin to see. And you said it best. I mean, Matt Patricia went to Detroit and took a page out of the New England Patriots playbook in that regard in terms of a committee. But the fact of the matter is, Kerryon Johnson is a special, special talent in my eyes. We saw what he did in college. It was against a poor Miami Dolphins run D. So, but look, if I tweeted something out early in the week last week, let's see Kerryon Johnson get the football 20 times. He got the ball in that range, and it was a beautiful thing. So hopefully it opens up Matt Patricia's eyes, and this is something that they – but you know, once you get inside the 5 or right around the goal line, it's LeGarrette Blount to vulture touchdowns, and we certainly don't like that. But theoretic's dinged, so I think that consequently has helped Kerryon Johnson. I think the football world wants to see a player like Kerryon Johnson get the football 20 times. And on the other side of that game, it was nice to see Kenyon Drake come out too.
Kyle, Marlon Mack showed up. I mean, look, I've been kind of a Marlon Mack skeptic over the course of time, just mainly because he's had a hard time staying on the field. He's been pretty productive on it this past week. He was super productive. I think one of the things that you noticed is all of a sudden the play action works. Amazing how that goes when you can actually have the threat of a legitimate run. It can work for your quarterback's favor. So how confident are you in Marlon Mack, the player? Let's throw the injury possibilities out the window. How good is Marlon Mack in your estimation?
In my humble estimation of talent, I'm not sure he's anything extremely special, but he's playing on an offense that has shown the ability to score seemingly at will, with Andrew Luck now being used like a real quarterback. After first 3 weeks, they used him rather timidly, still throwing the ball a lot, but not having any depth of target. Now with the threat of an actual passing game where Andrew Luck can beat you deep, opening up things for the run, I think at least, talent's a bit of an ambiguous thing, but volume plus a good situation makes me really want to buy into Marlon Mack.
Absolutely. And just to chime in real quick, gentlemen, in the football diehards draft book, Marlon Mack was my long shot player. I mean, we were optimistic. This guy drew LaShawn McCoy comparisons. I don't know that he's Shady McCoy, but Mack is very optimistic. Mike Clay was on the show earlier in the offseason and was optimistic about Nyheim Hines, thought he was the better back, but I think Marlon Mack can handle the ball if he's healthy close to 20 times. And a guy such as myself likes to see these volume backs do their thing.
Yeah, I would like to see him continue to get that kind of workload. I think it gives us somebody that we can hang our hat on in that offense. But mostly I just think it makes Andrew Luck a better player, and he's already pretty damn good. A little bit of play action, like I said, goes a long way. A couple other, we touched on the Lynch injury. Level of faith in Doug Martin, Justin?
No, it's that simple. It feels like his rookie season in Tampa Bay was a beautiful thing to watch. It just did not translate again after that. Since that, it's been awful. I will say that I like Jalen Richard, especially in PPR formats. His metrics lined up well when he touched the football last year. I want to see John Gruden use him accordingly. He's over 200 pounds. I think he can withstand the football 15 times. He's going to be an interesting player to watch. But if a name like Doug Martin at this point in time it's becoming humorous. It was starting to become disgusting in Tampa Bay. And now he's in Oakland, which seems fitting for a name like the Muscle Hamster. But I have zero optimism when it comes to Doug Martin. I'm more of a Jalen Richard guy. I like to see what he has to offer.
I'm not sure why muscle hamster makes me so uncomfortable. We'll go with it or not. Kyle, one more before we jump into your guys' favorite DFS plays this week. I wanted to say Sony Michel likely to miss some time. I want to disqualify Justin from this one as a fan. He's totally skewed in his regard to the Patriots. So James White's been producing at a super high level. I mean, considering kind of a limited role, right? Is he a guy you can count on as a running back one over the next couple of weeks if there is no Sony Michel, or can Kenyon Barner cut in, or even, let's say Mike Gillisley? I think if they were going to sign someone, they would have done it today. Haven't heard anything yet, so and we're talking on Tuesday. So what are your thoughts on where James White is? Have we seen the ceiling basically, or is there a little more room if there is no Sony Michel for a couple of weeks?
I will say we've mostly seen the ceiling, but after this, I don't see why there's any way he cannot keep sustaining this ceiling. When you look at his rushing attempts, I don't think that'll skyrocket a lot. I don't think it'll do very much. He's outside the top 40 in rushing attempts. That's just not how they use him, and it doesn't matter because when you go to, I'm assuming we're all adults, we're all playing PPR here. He's number 2 in the league in running back receptions, 6 touchdowns because he's a great red zone weapon. You can put him out there and get him in great linebacker mismatches. Maybe he's operating a ceiling, but the way things are going, the way things are trending for him, there's no reason he can't stay at this ceiling he's at right now. And can you rely on him as an RB1 as much as you can for any other back-end RB1 on a week-to-week basis?
Totally agree. You have this correct. We'll not need to hear from Justin on this, but we will need to hear from him as we head into the DFS portion of the program.
Yeah, gentlemen, this show is brought to you by DraftKings. As you both know, bragging rights and huge cash prizes are up for grabs this weekend and all season long at DraftKings. The leader in 1 week fantasy sports, DraftKings has paid out over $5 billion in prizes to date. This week, you can enter a free contest with your first $5 deposit using our promo code singular, diehards, DIEHARDS, to enter a contest for free this weekend with your first deposit and complete your share of cash prizes. That's code diehards. Only at DraftKings, the game inside the game. Just choose your players, stand with the salary cap, and see how your team stacks up against the competition.
So you're saying DraftKings has paid out more than I'm going to win tonight when my Mega Million numbers come in, right?
So far, so good. And their sports book is doing terrific in the state of New Jersey as well. Side note.
Their contests are wonderful things. So is my download a wonderful thing. So let's look at some of the players and some of the pricing that we're all excited about this week. I'll start with you, Kyle. We'll start at quarterback. Must plays in cash and must play in tournament.
In cash, I'm looking at a guy like Jameis Winston this week, 6K. In his 2 games back, he's had 45.5 attempts per game, plus a good, healthy 7.5 rush attempts per game. Just watching him anecdotally, he looked afraid of nothing, which for long term, we'll see how that goes. But in terms of his running, he was putting it all on the line, and now he gets the Bengals defense 31st in points allowed to quarterbacks. He'll probably be about as chalky as any quarterback can get. Quarterback ownership is one of the more flat positions, but he'll still be up there in terms of chalk. And then moving on to tournaments, I'm interested in Case Keenum. I know there were some rumblings of some Chad Kelly, but I believe the news
not anymore.
There are some different kind of rumblings this morning as we wake up to he was arrested this morning. I believe it was 2 weeks ago, Chad Kelly came out as take the knee in the first half to end the half, and people thought this was the end of the Case Keenum era. As you guys said, no more, and now we get to play someone against the Kansas City defense that has just given up game after game of great fantasy value to opposing quarterbacks. And when you look at, quarterbacks and the opposing quarterbacks' correlation of fantasy points, that's something that is relatively high because you're just looking for games with a lot of scoring. I think 5,100, a cheap Case Keenum, is an interesting way to parlay a good Patrick Mahomes game into your own fantasy value without getting that uber chalk of Patrick Mahomes.
Justin, your thoughts on the quarterback position in general in DFS world this week?
Yeah, I don't know that Jameis Winston is going to be as chalky as you think that he's going to be at this point. There's still some cynics. Pick six Jameis can come out, but I definitely agree with you, Kyle. I mean, he looked fearless, and we love that. This was a guy that was drafted, thrusted into the role, and he's back. It seemed like we were touting Ryan Fitzpatrick to be the next Joe Montana a few weeks ago, and that ship has sailed. So, I certainly like that game. I have quite a bit of interest in it, and I will agree with you there. And I also like Jared Goff at home against the Green Bay Packers. I think that works out well. He's been solid as anybody. We like the weapons surrounding him. Andrew Luck, gentlemen, flying to Oakland. Look, we talked about Andrew Luck all offseason long. All right, he's going to throw the Duke. Still hasn't thrown the Duke. Always his right shoulder. Is it too tight? 20 touchdowns, only 8 picks, close to 2,000 yards already. He's not throwing the ball to Jerry Rice. It's been a dinged-up T.Y. Hilton and players like Chester Rogers. And like Bob said, he's got a sound running game now, hopefully. So it's a position, quarterback is a position where we can certainly diversify ourselves. But for me, it's going to be Luck. It's probably going to be Winston. I don't know he's going to be that highly owned. And it's going to be Jared Goff. And if I want to pay down a little more, it's probably going to be Matthew Stafford at home against the Seattle Seahawks. He's getting a shade under 20 DraftKings points a game. And it's been a Matthew Stafford type of year. 12 TDs, 5 picks, shade under 20 fantasy points. So I'm fine with that.
I would say Joe Flacco at 5,300 is a worthwhile buy for me,
sure,
going against Carolina Panthers, who haven't been that tough. And C.J. Beathard against Arizona Cardinals. These are my tournament dart tosses this week. Nothing more than that, but I do like the matchups for both those characters. Running backs, Justin. Look, so how do we get away from playing Todd Gurley?
Well, you don't, especially if he's not quite a 10K. He probably should be priced higher. I mean, Kyle was talking about Gurley. I mean, there was some skepticism, and rightfully so, about what Todd Gurley was going to be in 2018. He had an off season a couple years ago. It was a different Rams team. This guy is unbelievable. They do not fool around with him when they get inside the red zone. 14 touchdowns already. He's getting over 30 DraftKings points a game, and God bless you. Saquon Barkley is a shade under him. I don't know how you can get off Saquon Barkley. We're going to save 1,000, and you head in that direction. For me, it's going to be Kareem Hunt and take a huge discount, 7,100, he had 32 DraftKings points week 6, 37 at home against the Bengals last week. This is the Kareem Hunt we thought that we were going to see, 9 touchdowns already. So I'm going to take a discount there, and I think Kareem Hunt, for me, they're favorites at Arrowhead over the Broncos. I'm going to have Kareem Hunt in just about every single lineup. And real quick, I'm going to go back to Marlon Mack. I like Andrew Luck to do his thing in Oakland. If you can guarantee me that Marlon Mack's going to get the football 20 times, I'm going to take that for 5,400. He's healthy, and I was optimistic about him in May when the draft book was getting ready to come out. I'm still optimistic now that he's healthy. And one more player I'm going to talk about is Tariq Cohen at home against the New York Jets. Cohen's a guy. Matt Nagy's using him, similar to Tyreek Hill. We've seen that comp. And he's had over 20 DraftKings points 3 straight weeks, 5,800. He's going to be involved. 7-8 receptions every week is a lock.
Kyle?
Yeah,
jump in the running back fray.
Some of the guys I'm looking at are this week, 4,700. Are you done, Justin?
Yeah.
Guys,
Shouldn't you be eating a ho-ho, Justin? Come on.
You're laughing. I heard him giggling, so I'm laughing at him.
Isn't it? It's 31:29 into the podcast so far, into our recording. That's eating a ho-ho time, Justin. Guys, I'm looking at Nick Chubb, 4,700. 18 attempts and 2 targets last week without Carlos Hyde. It seems like they're going to slot him into that exact role of a lot of attempts, not a lot of targets, but those attempts at just 4,700 I can buy into. And then a guy I'm disappointed in, but still has been a useful fantasy guy, even if not the guy we purchased, is David Johnson, 6,700. He's 5th in the league in rushing attempts this week. It's San Francisco's awful run defense, 28th in points allowed. And then looking at a game will be getting on in as many ways as possible. Phillip Lindsay, stacking with Case Keenum. He's got 10 plus rush attempts, or he's averaging 10 rush attempts, just shy of 3 targets, splitting that receiving role with Devontae Booker. If he's the receiving half of the receiving back game in a game against Kansas City, who's going to force the other team to throw, I'm totally willing to get on that as well as just playing Kansas City's defense. I'll get on that in any way. And then, I think that's the core of my running back plays.
What about Chris Carson? Any Chris Carson love at 4,300? Just paying for volume?
I think he's a crazy good price. What about guys like, I would probably he might make one of my lineups or two. But what if there is no Dalvin Cook and no Leonard Fournette, as we assume? Latavius Murray, 4,900 going against the Saints, and Carlos Hyde at 4,100. Although I don't like the matchup that much, the price is pretty sweet.
Carlos Hyde, I don't know how I feel about that. Actually, I do know. It's a stay away for me. Right now we don't know what we're getting with that, and that's not something I'm particularly looking to buy into when I don't know what timeshare of a committee I'm looking to get. And then moving on, Latavius Murray's great value. Anytime Dalvin Cook doesn't play, it can be the Latavius Murray show. He's not awfully talented. I don't think people are raving over his talent, but like we preach on the show, it's opportunity, and with no Dalvin Cook, Latavius Murray gets all of that opportunity. That's a great play, and until they start pricing him up, because, we never know if Dalvin Cook's going to play, they never price him up to fix that, which makes sense. If he's a backup, he becomes completely useless at a high price, but if they don't price him up, he's a great value, and they haven't done that again this week. Love Latavius Murray as long as you're staying up to date on the Dalvin Cook news.
Right. Love the 2 long touchdown runs last week, and he can be that guy on occasion. So nice there. Justin, as far as the wide receiving cores go, who you like this week, differentiating between cash and tournament plays, please.
Well, we talk about the Bucs Bengals game, and I think I want a piece of it. So I'm going to go AJ Green. If I want to save some money and have a little more uncertainty, I think that's Tyler Boyd. We like what Boyd has done, but if I'm going to spend $6,700 on Boyd, I'm probably going to pay up a little for AJ Green because I think that we know exactly what we're getting when we talk about AJ Green, and that is elite. And at 7,200, I'm going to go right back to Jarvis Landry as I did last week, and I'm hoping that his 15 more targets. I think it's another game script where it could look very similar to Week 7 against the Bucs. So if you're telling me Jarvis Landry is going to be targeted 15 times, I'm going to take him at 7,200. I think Jarvis Landry, from a fantasy angle, is elite. He was within the top 6 last year in PPR formats. I love that. And when I find myself paying way down, like last week, it was the Taylor Gabriels of the world that screwed us. And the Marquise Goodwins were not terrific. I don't want to really be a penny pincher at wide receiver. So I'm going to stick right around that range, and I'm going to want the A.J. Greens, the Jarvis Landrys of the world, and probably a healthy T.Y. Hilton. We know his rapport with Andrew Luck, and it goes without saying. So in cash games, I'll probably have T.Y. Hilton, A.J. Green. I'm going to have him in tournaments.
Kyle, I am a cheapskate. I want to pinch pennies. Help me do that at wide receiver.
Yeah, some of the guys I'm looking at this week, Justin made some great calls. I love that T.Y. Hilton one, by the way. I think that's one of the best ones you mentioned. But looking to pay down right now, I'm looking at Robbie Anderson. He saw 10 targets last week, turned it into a whopping 44 yards and 3 catches against a good Minnesota Vikings defense. I give them some credit there. But Robbie Anderson's a bit of a boom-bust guy. He's actually likely the definition of a boom-bust guy. So maybe a tournament play there, but it's just so cheap. And without Quincy Enunwa, again, those are the kind of cheap, high-volatility targets you're looking to buy into. And for something, a bit more stable, when you're paying down, you're never going to get supreme stability.
Right.
But anytime you get a chance to get a Kansas City receiver that is not Tyreek Hill for less than $5,000, I'm doing that. And Sammy Watkins this week is just 4,600, and anytime I can get a Kansas City offensive player for that price, one that's at least somewhat involved. He's not their main receiver. He's probably not even their second, considering they have Travis Kelce. But last week we saw seven targets, 4 receptions, 74 yards. Basically, he can do that any given week. 2 weeks before that, 8, 6, and 78. It's just if he gets in the end zone, and of course that's a little bit of a tricky thing to pin down. Touchdowns are random. Bob, you said it before. It's a weird shaped ball. They put laces on it for some reason. But anytime I can buy into this offense for that cheap, get a reasonable amount of targets, I'm looking to do so. And he's provided a much higher floor than Robbie Anderson, who would be the tournament play on cheap wide receivers.
Your premises, sir, are sound. Justin, put your water wings on. It's time to jump into the sea of mediocrity. Swim away, my friend. Tell me who we're playing this week. Which matchups appeal most to you at the tight end position?
Do we have to?
We have to.
Yeah, It's going to be Jimmy Graham at the Rams, under 5K. I think Aaron Rodgers likes him. This is a unique Packers offense. It's a little different than one we've grown accustomed to without Jordy Nelson. There's no real sound running game. Not that he's had a consistently sound running game, but I'm all over Graham. I think he had 10 targets Week 5, 9 targets Week 6 against the Niners, and George Kittle did his thing against the Rams last week. So I'm going to take Jimmy Graham. It is the sea of mediocrity, and you can find yourself in a heap of mud. So I'm not really straying too far from Jimmy Graham at this point. I do like some Trey Burton. I like how he was used against the Patriots, but an offense can do whatever they want against the New England Patriots. So I'm not sure that that's a testament to what Trey Burton is. I know Evan Ingram's back at 4,300. Not sure what he is. I'm locked in on David Njoku and Jimmy Graham and not much else.
Kyle?
I want to double down on David Njoku because I had him written down as cash. I believe he was the most popular play of the week last week, which in cash is fine. If you look at his target totals in games where Baker Mayfield starts, 7, 11, 12, 6, and he's converted that into at least 50 receiving yards every time. His floor seems to be among the best, even if this Browns offense doesn't give him the highest ceiling. And then looking over at tournaments, since we expect that David Njoku play to be one of the higher owned ones, I'm looking at Greg Olsen just because he's so cheap relative to the guys who I feel safe with. It's only 4,300 for a guy who's been targeted a lot already in his return, and he's still learning this new offense that is new to him at least. I think once he starts to get into the rhythm of things, 4,300 will be a value for Greg Olsen.
I'll buy that. On defense, last week playing the Indianapolis Colts in my tournament lineups, picking on the quarterback kept me from, I broke even. So, again, not losing is winning, kids. But who do we like on defenses? Is there any quarterbacks we're picking on or anyone in general that seems like a must-play to you this week, fellows? Starting with you, Justin.
I think I like the Rams at home against Aaron Rodgers. I can't get off 2,600. I'm looking at that price. I know it's Aaron Rodgers, but, man, they look defensively, they haven't been as good as we thought that they were going to be, but they can make plays all over the field. They're averaging over 11 fantasy points per game. I'm fine with the Rams. I think it's more of a tournament play. In terms of safety, I don't know that I'm going to go back to the Colts, but I might use some Arizona Cardinals at home against the Niners. And we're not talking about, I know you said you liked Beathard this weekend. I like the Cardinals at home. Look, gentlemen, there's no defense anymore. We're talking about points galore, so it's hard to really pinpoint what defense is going to show up. I tend to like home defenses. But outside of the Rams tonight, because we do record on Tuesdays, it looks like the Cardinals and the Rams for me.
I'll go out on a limb and say the Eagles show up. Kyle, you.
Yeah, in weeks like this where I think Justin's very, very right in saying that it's just hard to find good defenses. All this scoring, you pull up your spreadsheet of Vegas totals, and they're all, 51, 54.5, 50, 56.5. I see a 52 down there. How am I supposed to pick a defense out of this? But if I'm going to do so, I'm going to look at Pittsburgh's defense. I don't want to pick on Baker Mayfield because I do like him, but the Browns have given up 5 sacks in each of the past 3 games, as well as averaging a pick in each of those games. That's the type of variance I can get into for just 2,300. 5 sacks in three consecutive games. This offensive line looks like they can be picked on. Baker Mayfield, still a young player, still getting his bearings, and maybe Pittsburgh can take advantage of that. And in games or in slates where we don't know what defense to go with, I just prefer to pay down because it's such a variant position anyways that just pay down and let the variance take control.
I'm greedy. I like to play whoever's playing the Buffalo Bills. Hello, New England. It's a Monday night game, though, so a little problematic for the Sunday slates. All right, gentlemen. Any final thoughts from anybody here before we call this one a show?
Well, I think we touched on everything. I can't imagine, I can't believe that we're so deep into the season already. You got to savor it like a steak. I mean, it's been awesome so far, and I appreciate being on with you guys every single week.
Yeah,
I don't eat the meat, so I don't really enjoy the steak.
That's true.
Actually,
that's true.
Justin, you're in a minority here. You meat-eating savage?
But you don't eat meat either, Kyle?
No.
Really?
No.
How long have you been a vegetarian for? I didn't know that.
Like 6 months, something like that. Coming up on Bob here. Bob, you went over a year over the summer, didn't you?
I'm well past a year. It's not as bad as you think, Justin. But before we start comparing how we saute our broccoli, I think we'll call this one a show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Justin, close us out.
Yeah, have a good night. And again, I can't. It's already week 8. I think we're 30 shows in, the 3 of us, which just is another testament of time flying. I hope everybody's doing all right. If your season-long leagues are tanking, remember this show is brought to you by obviously footballdiehards.com and DraftKings, where you're not married to any of these players. So if your season-long teams are tanking, sign up for DraftKings.
Yeah, as they say in the podcasting business, Bob, myself, be completely unrelatable to your audience, and that's how you get them to love you. As always, you can get your Football Diehards podcast updates. Justin Lonero at Justin Lonero, Bob Harris at Football Diehard, and myself at FF Kid. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.